you doing, everybody? Welcome back to Friday Questions. 2 weeks in a row. Personal best.
We're going with black this week. Not the exact same shirt, but we are color matching quite well now.
Yes. Well, as Mark put it, different background. We're deep in the bowels of Desert Breeze Community Church. Back here, it's just us and these dead crickets over here. So
we may go to them for answers at some point.
Well, we got a theme to our questions this week. That theme is, and these questions actually kind of were born out of the current Winsome Christianity class going on, because it's all about talking to other people about your religion, especially people who don't share those same beliefs, people who are from other religions. And so they were asking about some of the most common pushbacks against Christianity. And if you go online, you'll find 100 different articles about the most common pushbacks, and there's variations to all of them. So we just picked two of those. We picked two questions to look at today. The first is, how can you claim that Jesus is the only way to God? Now, one thing that I would like to point out before we touch on these is something that I've heard Pastor Ray say before, but what you find is the people who are most vocal about their disbelief or about their uncertainty. There's another word for that eludes me at the moment, but the people that are most skepticism, yeah. The people that are most vocal about their skepticism don't hold themselves to the same scrutiny that they want to hold Christianity to. Mm-hmm. They're like, prove to me beyond a shadow of a doubt that the Bible is wholly true and complete. Only then will I believe. Okay, well, one, your own personal beliefs. How did you come to those? Did you prove them to yourself? So we're going to go into these questions, but if you face these questions, a thing to remember is I don't feel pressure to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt something, because whoever you're speaking to, they can't prove beyond a shadow of a doubt what they believe. And you get the people who are like, well, I believe science. It's like, yeah, okay, I believe science too, but most of science is a hypothesis. We think this is what it is based on our current knowledge, but how many times over the past, 100 years have we made a discovery that revolutionized what we think? Everything we thought we knew about it is wrong. So let's not hold up what we think we know at the moment as the absolute truth. That is the truth from the evidence that we have, the hypothesis that we have made based off of what we know now. So even then, there's no proof beyond shadow of a doubt of much in life.
Right.
So as you get pushback, let's just keep that in the back of our mind. One, you can prove very little in life. And two, they're not holding themselves to the same standards, right?
Yeah, it's almost as if they want to approach this like their favorite courtroom scene in a movie or TV show where, all right, I need to have indisputable facts and evidence all the way down to I need to have the murder weapon, or I need to have all the facts and figures. And one of the things that's been one of the major tenets of the Winsome Christianity series, and George Hopman is leading the current series and doing a phenomenal job. I would also say that whenever you listen to this, as of recording, there are 2 Tuesdays left in August. You should come to those classes because he is delivering some fantastic information on how to naturally relate to people about Christianity.
And the next two classes are covering
Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormonism. So, yeah, again, really, really helpful approach, and just really great, easy to remember tactics. One of the ones that we've talked about quite frequently is ask questions. So as people are making these kinds of demands, like we're about to look at here in a moment, the great thing is to, like you just said, Luke, ask the questions back. How did they come to believe whatever it is that they're trying to refute about Christianity? How did you come to believe that you think it's wrong, that Jesus is the only way? And let them begin to share their thought process and their mental construct of what they think spirituality is. And that can be helpful to
is that my phone?
someone calling us. So is this a live show now?
I guess so.
Long-time listener, first-time caller?
Third caller, you're on the air.
Yeah, that it's really helpful to find out where they're coming from, because I think lots of times when you get people who are really skeptical and do a lot of pushback, it's YouTube videos or they heard it from someone, and I don't know if they've done all the digging.
Yeah.
But having said all that, we do have some content to provide that will be helpful with a couple of these questions.
Well, the other part of that is asking them, what do they actually believe?
Mm-hmm.
You know, if they're, well, you can't, that's so stupid, whatever, that you can't believe that.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you, what do you think?
Don't just tell me what I believe is wrong. Tell me what you believe as well, just for conversation.
Yeah, and that's the thing about it is you want to make it a conversation, because if you get pushback and immediately turn around and are like, throw a stone at me, I'm going to throw a stone at you,
right.
Tell you how stupid you are, is that winning anybody to Christ?
No, not at all.
No.
Not at all. So this first question, probably the idea of how do we know Jesus is the only way to God.
Did I say the first question?
Yeah, you mentioned it
like
5 minutes ago.
Okay.
We threw it out there, and then we set the table for it. I think for a lot of people, this comes from the current mindset in our culture of plurality,
individualism to an extent.
Yes, the analogy that people use all the time is a mountain with all these different roads, and they all lead to the pinnacle of the mountain, the peak.
Yeah.
And so just like that mountain, there's different ways to get up the mountain. There are different ways to get to God. And so the exclusiveness and the restrictiveness of Christianity doesn't really jive with our current culture, where we think everyone should have the right to have their own opinion, to believe whatever they believe, leave everyone alone. You be an individual. You believe what you believe, I believe what I believe, and we'll just all go our individual roads, and we'll probably, they would say, all end up in the same place.
There's a band that I really like, and there was a lot of struggling through how to walk through life and how do we handle our sinfulness and God's holiness and how to get through life. And as a band, they've been around for nearly 20 years, I think. And in their last album, he's got this song that's saying, beyond right and wrong, is there a field, and am I going to meet you there? So it's like over 20 years of just bombardment from the music industry. They started off with a very solid foundation and have ended up with, well, maybe I'm not right. Maybe I don't know. Maybe there is multiple ways to God. So it's a prevalent force in society.
Yeah, and it really fits into, I don't want to offend anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Never want to tell someone they're wrong, so why can't we all be right?
Yeah.
In fact, there are quite a few folks out there who will be very vocal about, I've taken the best out of every religion and put them together, almost like a buffet. Like an all-you-can-eat religious buffet where they take things from each individual section and put it all together, and on their plate is now, this is my belief system. I like this about Jesus. I like this about Buddha. I like this about Islam. I like this about the New Age philosophy, and they just kind of throw it all together.
And I feel like in the United States, there are those people who take that approach, but I would bet the majority of people don't really think about it, haven't really come to a concrete, and just fall back to, well, I'm basically a good person.
Sure, yeah, exactly. And as you mentioned, in our country, around the world, people tend to be pretty staunch about what they believe, and they adhere to a belief system. So they wouldn't argue you're just one of many, they would say, no, you're wrong, and ours is right, and here's why. So let's tackle this a little bit.
Yeah.
When we say Jesus is the only way to God, that's an argument people use against Christianity. What could be some things to say in response? This actually came up in last Tuesday night's class, and George actually gave me a chance to answer. He kicked it back to me. And the statement I gave, that I've given often in the years I taught, or even just conversations with people, I begin with this. I say, all right, the person of Jesus, if you look closely at what is written and said about him, Jesus said and did things that no other person or no other individual who claims to be deity or God of any type, no one has ever said and done those things.
Mm-hmm.
There have been variations, and a lot of people try to take Jesus and mimic him with someone else. Well, in this religion, this God also died. Okay, so there's a similarity. Of course there's going to be similarities with other belief systems in the person of Jesus.
The most insidious lie is the one with a thread of truth through it.
Exactly. And Jace and I both used, it was Jace's line, I borrowed it from him. We used this line at the two camps we spoke at this summer. We told kids, Jesus is just built different. Jesus is just built different. And what we mean by that is that Jesus said things about himself and did things that really set him apart from anyone else who's ever existed. And especially the Gospel of John is perhaps most helpful, because there are about 5 places in the Gospel of John where Jesus being God is very definitively either stated by someone, or Jesus said something that he was clearly communicating, I am God. And I'll give you those references in a second if you want to jot them down and look at them. But the person of Jesus is unique and different. And so if God is only attainable through what we believe to be a perfect sacrifice, we can't do it on our own. Every other belief system, whoever it is or whatever it is that is the vehicle to get to God, is going to pale in comparison and fail to who Jesus was as a person.
Well, the other thing is, when you say Jesus is built differently, there's another aspect to that too. If you look at every other religion in the world, you will find a through line in all of them. And that through line is, if I do X, Y, and Z and build up enough points, I go to heaven. And the difference between those and Christianity, and again, the difference between Jesus is Christianity is the one religion where it says there was no way to get there. God came down.
Mm-hmm.
It removes our ability to get to heaven on our own. Every other religion, when you look at it, is just this staircase that you have to climb. And what does that do? It takes the control out of God's hands and puts it back in my hand.
Right.
So as long as I tip the scales on the good side, nobody can say anything to me.
Yeah.
I control 100%. I replace God.
Yeah. Every other religion is, so you're saying there's a chance.
Yeah.
I could do the right combination of things, or I could believe the right combination of beliefs, and I could get there. Yeah, and our understanding, and again, I also will let people know, look, it's not that the Christians are better than other people of other religions, it's Jesus is better.
Yeah.
We're aligning ourselves to the one who came down and became man and bridged the gap for us. No other belief system offers that kind of connection to God. It is, like you said, everything that we say and do or believe, everything that we can accomplish on our own arrives us at that point.
Yeah. And it all comes back to an acceptance or rejection of God by saying, I can get there through my actions. I don't need you, God.
Right.
I got this.
Right. So those references, if you want them, and you can jot them down or hit record or write them down at some point. There's 5 in the Gospel of John, and there are 4 or 5. One is not directly him claiming to be God, but one the way to God. And then there's 4 of them outside of John and the rest of the New Testament. So very quickly, John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. John 14:6 is when Jesus describes he is the way to God. Then in John 8, like 57 through 59, it's the end of John 8. Jesus is having a conversation with the Pharisees, and they're talking about Abraham, and Jesus makes this very famous statement: before Abraham was, I am. And I am, he's hyperlinking back to the I am that God claimed himself to be with Moses back in the early part of the Old Testament. John 10, 27 through 31, he literally says to the Pharisees, I and the Father are one. And in both of those, John 8 and John 10, the Pharisees pick up stones to stone him because he's committed blasphemy. So you know Jesus is saying something pretty powerful. And then the last one is John 20, when Thomas, upon seeing Jesus after the resurrection, says, my Lord and my God, like refers to him as God. And then there's four more outside of the Gospel of John in the rest of the New Testament letters. I'll just give you the references. You can look them up. Colossians 2:9, Titus 2:13, Hebrews 1:8, and 2 Peter 1:1. Those are all statements about Jesus being God. The other thing that I would offer as a way to talk about this, how is Jesus the only way to God, why is Jesus the only way to God, is I would land, and no one's going to be surprised if they've been around us for a while here, we're going to land on the resurrection.
Yeah.
As being the definitive event in history that changed everything. And no one has...
Threw the whole world upside down.
Yes, by saying, hey, I'm going to die and I'm going to rise again, and then he pulled it off and did it. Other people have had savior complexes who have died, but not necessarily died for people. Often they've died like as a martyr.
Yeah.
Where Jesus died for the world. But then the resurrection is the key. And I would take you back to 1 Corinthians 15 and read through as Paul delineates how we know the resurrection is legitimate and real. The fact that Jesus, he sacrificed his life so you and I wouldn't have to. And then he defeated death so that death couldn't defeat us. The resurrection is the linchpin. And I would even, we've talked about how don't let people take you off course too much. And this is a classic question where they're trying to get you off course. Bring it back to Jesus, explain who he is, and specifically lean into the resurrection as an historical event. The early church didn't believe something that they had heard or something that they wished for. They believed in an event. And I witnessed that event. And that's why I think the resurrection is what sets Jesus apart, so that now Jesus is the only way to connect to God because he's the only one who did what only God could do.
Yeah.
And those can be maybe some helpful talking points. People may still reject that and say, well, that's just your version and that's just your Bible and so on. But even for you personally, as an individual who, like, I know that Jesus is the only way, but why do I believe that? Maybe that can be some helpful thoughts for you.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so second question, and this is one of those, it says, isn't Christianity a crutch for people to avoid facing the realities of this world? This is another one where the actual, for lack of a better word, hypocrisy behind it.
I mean, like everybody's using a crutch.
Yeah, you just use a crutch to avoid facing the reality of the world. Most of the people that would say this, not everybody, but I'm going to make a sweeping generalization. Most people that would say this probably drink to avoid facing the world, probably shop to avoid facing reality, probably, or, we have all these things that we do to avoid facing reality. So it's another one of these things where they drop this brick on Christianity thinking, I got you, while carrying around their backpack of bricks going,
right.
Nothing to see here. So it's amazing most of the things that they try to throw at you, they are literally doing themselves without admitting it.
Yeah. Yeah, I would offer we're all crippled and broken. We all need a crutch, or we're all using something as a crutch to get through life. This one is probably more because we're relying on something that's not naturalistic and scientific.
Yeah.
And so the argument is, like, they equate faith to you're believing in something that's can't be seen, that can't be verified. It's like a fairy tale.
Yeah, and they would
Um,
say, well, I believe in science, and I believe in what I can prove. Well, you don't
Right.
really, well, I mean, one, you don't really believe in it if it's proven to you.
Right.
It just is.
Right. Right.
But the other thing is, most of, it's funny, I was listening to this radio show, I can't remember, a couple years back, and they were talking about stuff, and they were talking about how much they realized they don't know in life.
Hmm.
They've been told it at some point, they take it at face value. How about this? What is the difference between a sweet potato and a yam?
They're both equally delicious in my mind. Not everyone believes that, but yeah, I wouldn't. I didn't. Is there, or are they just two names for the same thing?
Well, here's the funny thing: is this person who was talking? They were like, I realized how much I didn't know, so I made a list of things I mean to know in life, and that was number
Nice.
2 on their list. They never made it past number 1. Like, how does gravity work? How do things orbit? How does the weather work? We take these things that we've been told about. We take these things that we've been told about something at face value because we trust the person
Right.
who told us that, or we trust the individual. Most of this stuff we don't actually know ourselves. I know gravity exists because I was taught that in school, and that's what they named it.
And I experience it when I fall down.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't remember where that tangent came from. Mark, why don't you take over?
It was. I think it was the idea. I don't even know either for sure. That our faith is based on wishful thinking, and really, there's a lot. I like this analogy. Draw a circle on a piece of paper.
Yes.
Say, let's say a circle represents everything that can be known in the universe. That's how much you probably know, and even that's being generous by making a dot in the circle.
Yeah, and I heard somebody else give a similar example, and they were like, have the person draw a circle to represent everything that's known,
And then
now
tell
them,
them,
now draw a circle of how much of that you know, and depending on how big their ego is, will determine the size of the circle. And you say, so you're telling me that nowhere outside of that circle could God be?
Yeah. Makes it difficult.
Yeah.
But they enjoy these kinds of things. I think, again, what's helpful with this line of questioning is to, one, take it back to the resurrection. It's not a faith that's whimsical and hopeful and cross your fingers and emotional, although there are all those things, emotion involved in it. But again, my faith is based upon an event and a person that really happened and all the things around it. I think about the idea that when people say it's a crutch, was that Karl Marx who said that religion was the opiate of the masses?
It might have been.
Was it Marx or was it Lenin? You'll know. You can look it up. It was one of those two. And the idea was that religion, the opiate, like it's the drug of the masses. The masses just go to it. And say that, again, I care more about the fact that the person of Jesus is what I put my trust in. My faith is based on evidence. It's not on wishful thinking.
Karl Marx.
Was it Marx? Okay.
Yeah.
And that I am placing my faith and trust in Jesus because I believe he is the one who originally created me, and I have lived my entire existence trying to return back to what I was meant to be, how I was created to be, how I was designed to be. And my trust in him is not, I need something supernatural to kind of explain away the realities of life. I would say that when you really are connected to Jesus and you follow what he has laid before us, you probably have the most realistic view of what life is like, what it is now and what it can be with him, and what it will be in eternity with him. That in many ways, I'm not sidestepping reality. I'm leaning into reality. What is reality? Not the thought of what you think reality is, but what is real, and that is that God created us, that our sins separated us, and that God is in the constant state of renewing us to that position where one day we can be complete and whole like we're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And so, and again, I think leaning into evidence and reasons, the rationality of Christianity, along with the emotional side. But that's the great thing, is that following Jesus is both of those. It's your head and your heart.
Mm-hmm.
And when we combine those, I think some people look at it and they just see the emotional. And some Christians have done us a disservice by saying, "Well, I just believe God," and they don't take things on headstrong. They don't deal with the problem of evil or the problem of suffering and try to walk through it as a follower of Jesus. And how does Scripture speak to those things? They just kind of flit them away as, "Well, I just trust God and I just believe in Him." And if we're doing due diligence, we would say that's not actually a real biblical or Christ-like approach to those things, but instead to face them and be unknown, be okay with the unknown, but anchor myself to what I do know, and that is who Jesus is and what He did and what He offers. And again, that hope, just this last week, Pastor Ray was talking about hope a little bit, and that hope isn't wishful thinking. Hope is, this is going to happen someday, and I'm waiting for it to happen, but I know it's going to happen. It isn't like, I hope the Phoenix Suns win the NBA championship, because that is really weak hope right there. But it's more of a confidence in what's going to happen. When we explain it that way, again, people may not change their mind, but it removes this idea that I'm just clinging to a fairy tale or a fantasy that I hope is true, in the sense of I hope it's a real thing, and I don't know for sure, but it's helping me sleep at night kind of issue.
Yeah.
That it's much more than that. And we can speak against that pretty clearly, I think.
Well, and I've seen people hang on to Christianity like that before. They went to church as a kid, in their mind, they believe they're saved. They don't go to church currently.
Right.
They don't live in any different way, but they'll tell you they're going to heaven. And it's like, one, are they? I don't know. That's between them and God. I don't know if they were saved. I don't know what's in their heart right now. But you do see people who just hang on to it with no idea whatsoever. They were told this is what you do so you don't go to the bad place, and they've hung on to that. And, it's unfortunate to see. But
Yeah, they're not grasping the entire breadth of what it means to have a relationship with Jesus and to know Him intimately. They're almost hanging on to the religious side of what Christianity is, just the religious aspects, not the relationship aspects.
I got my contract in place.
Right. Got my fire insurance.
Yeah.
Right.
So hopefully those are helpful. There's a ton out there. We didn't want to get into, is there a God or anything.
Maybe we'll
like
do a
that.
couple more next week.
Yeah, but
unless we get great questions from you.
Yeah. So send your questions in, questions@dbcc.com. We'll be back next week.
See you next week.
See you next week.